The shocking truth about Rob and Michele Reiner's deaths may be nothing you expected, and it's tied to the very person they love the most. Imagine the couple who lit up Hollywood with laughter, hope, and love now being remembered in headlines for something unthinkable: their own son accused of ending their lives. Why would someone so close to them, someone they nurtured for decades, take such a dark turn? There's a side of this story that hasn't been told, a truth hidden behind family loyalty, mental health struggles, and decades of personal bonds forged in the most unlikely places. Few know the depths of Rob and Michele's compassion, how they fought for justice and second chances, or how that very philosophy now collides with tragedy. And yet, there's a reveal coming that could rewrite the narrative. You think you know something even Hollywood insiders didn't see coming. Stick with this story, because what comes next uncovers secrets that aren't in the tabloids. The journey begins not in their homes, not in the courtroom, but decades earlier, in a world most of us will never understand: the prison system, and a friendship that would challenge everything we think about love, loyalty, and justice. By the end of this story, you'll see Rob and Michele Reiner's legacy in a way no one has dared to show, and the question remains: what would they have truly wanted for their son Nick? From the outside, Rob and Michele Reiner's life seemed like a Hollywood dream: success, recognition, a loving family. But beneath the glimmering lights and red carpet appearances was a story far more complex, a narrative woven with empathy, advocacy, and connections few could ever imagine. One of the most unlikely threads in that tapestry was Nannen Williams, a man who had spent over 3 decades incarcerated for a crime he insists he didn't commit. Their paths crossed in 2016 at a Los Angeles theater during a one-man show called Lyrics from Lockdown, inspired by Nannen's life behind bars. Rob and Michele didn't just watch the performance, they saw the man behind the story, a human being shaped by circumstances, injustice, and resilience. From that moment, a bond was forged that would challenge conventional ideas of family, loyalty, and love. Over the next 10 years, that bond deepened into something extraordinary. Daily emails, each signed with "I love you," weekly phone calls, and countless conversations about freedom, fairness, and human dignity became the rhythm of their unusual friendship. Nannen describes it not as charity or spectacle, but as family. He saw in the Reiners a philosophy that was both simple and profound. That legacy isn't about accolades or wealth, it's about the lives you touch, the hope you plant, and the changes you ignite in the world around you. Rob, known to friends as Meathead, approached life with unrelenting energy and a firm sense of justice. Michele, his partner in both marriage and mission, shared that vision, ensuring that compassion, empathy, and action went hand in hand. Yet, even in this extraordinary connection, shadowed threads of tragedy lurked. Their son, Nick Reiner, was not a stranger to challenges. Diagnosed with schizophrenia at a young age, Nick's life had been marked by the delicate balancing act between support and independence, love and concern. The Reiners' devotion to him was unwavering. They nurtured him, protected him, and celebrated every small victory. But as fate would cruelly turn, that same son became the center of a chilling narrative, charged with the first-degree murder of the parents who had dedicated their lives to him. It's a story almost impossible to reconcile, the collision of unthinkable loss with decades of unconditional love. Nannen Williams, reflecting on the bond he shared with the Reiners, emphasizes one crucial truth: Rob and Michele would never have wanted to see Nick suffer. Their philosophy extended beyond their own lives, encompassing the struggles of others, even those who had faltered. Williams recalls countless conversations with Rob about justice, not just as a societal concept, but as a moral imperative. He saw Rob's fight for fairness as a living principle, a commitment that transcended fame or fortune. And now, in the shadow of tragedy, that principle raises a profound question: what would justice look like for Nick, and what would his parents have truly wanted? Even as the legal system moves to define guilt and assign punishment, the story at its heart is about legacy, love, and the human capacity for understanding. Rob and Michele's life work, their philosophy, their very essence, is being tested by an event that feels both surreal and unbearably real. And while the public grapples with the shocking headlines, few are aware of the intimate, private relationships that shaped the Reiners lives the friendships, the mentorships, the unwavering belief in second chances. This is the hidden layer of the story, the part that casts the tragedy not only in darkness, but also in a light that reveals the humanity, the ethics, and the extraordinary empathy of a family whose love transcended convention. December 14th, 2025, was a date that would fracture the world of Rob and Michele Reiner forever. A morning that, on the surface, seemed ordinary, would soon be defined by horror, confusion, and a relentless media storm. Their son, Nick Reiner, 32, had been charged with the first-degree murder of the very parents who had spent decades shaping his life, advocating for him, and nurturing his fragile mental health. For a family so steeped in love, compassion, and understanding, the news was seismic, almost impossible to reconcile. How could the same hands that had held him, guided him, and encouraged him now be at the center of such a devastating narrative? Few outside the family truly understand Nick's history. Diagnosed with schizophrenia years ago, his life was often a tightrope between stability and crisis. The Reiners approached this not with judgment, but with patience, empathy, and unwavering devotion. Michele and Rob were not just parents, they were advocates, educators, and protectors, ensuring Nick received therapy, medication, and emotional support. Even within the chaos of mental health treatment, their commitment never wavered. Yet, in the shadow of tragedy, it becomes painfully clear that love, no matter how profound, cannot always shield someone from their inner demons. Nanan Williams, the man whose life had intertwined with Rob and Michele in ways few could imagine, provides a rare glimpse into how the Reiners approached these challenges. They understood him better than anyone, Williams tells People. They knew his struggles, his fears, his uncertainties, and they would have wanted him to get help, real help, not just punishment. That's what they believed. That's who they were. Williams' insight is not just anecdotal. It's informed by decades of personal experience with human suffering, injustice, and resilience. He saw in the Reiners a philosophy that extended beyond their own family, a principle that those who falter should be met with understanding and support, not only retribution. Yet, the tragedy of December 14th is as much a story about circumstances as it is about mental health. The details emerging from law enforcement and court filings paint a picture of sudden, violent action, leaving the public scrambling to reconcile this act with the man they knew as Nick Reiner. For the Reiners' children, Jake, 34, and Romy, 28, the shock is compounded by grief, confusion, and the unimaginable challenge of navigating both a personal loss and a legal nightmare. Even in the midst of their own anguish, they maintain a connection with Nanan Williams, who remains a confidant and witness to the enduring philosophy of their parents. I received emails from Jake and Romy on January 4th, Williams shares. Even in what must be the hardest moments of their lives, they expressed care, love, and loyalty not just to each other, but to me. That was their parents' influence, love, and action. But the story is far from simple. What happened that day is still shrouded in questions, contradictions, and complexities that only those closest to the Reiners and Nick can begin to articulate. Williams hints at the unresolved nature of mental health interventions, the gaps between treatment and crisis management, and the societal structures that often fail families in extraordinary circumstances. No one knows exactly what help looks like right now, he explains, his words tinged with frustration and sorrow. But if Rob and Michele were here, they would have fought to find it. They always did. This section of the story forces a confrontation with uncomfortable truths. Love and dedication, even when boundless, cannot always prevent tragedy. It also raises critical questions about legacy, how Rob and Michele's commitment to justice, empathy, and transformation is being tested in the most intimate and painful way imaginable. As the world reacts to shocking headlines, the deeper, hidden narrative emerges. A family grappling with mental illness, loyalty, and the devastating consequences of a day that will forever change the course of their lives. And yet, even in the midst of tragedy, there are threads of hope, echoes of the Reiners' enduring philosophy. Through Nanan Williams, through the continued advocacy of their children, and through the unbroken belief in second chances, the story becomes not only one of loss, but also of profound humanity, a reminder that understanding, compassion, and love are forces that persist, even in the darkest moments. But the question remains, lingering like a shadow over every revelation. What could Rob and Michele have done differently, if anything? And what does their legacy truly demand in a world that seems bent on simplifying tragedy into headlines? Rob and Michele Reiner were more than a Hollywood power couple. They were architects of empathy, champions of justice, and curators of a legacy that transcended awards and accolades. But as the tragedy surrounding their son Nick unfolds, their philosophy, their intentions, and the principles they lived by are now being tested in ways they never anticipated. To truly understand the weight of this story, one must look at the Reiners not just as celebrities, but as people who dedicated themselves to creating meaning and change in a world often indifferent to suffering. Rob, with his unmistakable presence, was a man of conviction. Known to many as Meathead from his iconic role in All in the Family, he carried that persona into his real life with the same fierce determination, always fighting for fairness, always speaking out against injustice. Nannen Williams recalls how Rob's understanding of legacy was profoundly intertwined with action. He liked the idea that legacy wasn't about you. It was about giving something to people, planting seeds of love that might grow long after you're gone. I just didn't think would already be talking about his legacy in this way. The irony is painful. The very seeds of love Rob and Michele planted, nurturing everyone from family to friends like Nannen, are now intersecting with an unimaginable tragedy in their own home. Michele, often seen alongside Rob, but always a force in her own right, reinforced the family philosophy of empathy and empowerment. She wasn't a sidekick. She was a partner in every sense, raising children, advocating for mental health, and engaging with the community in ways that complemented Rob's bold, outspoken nature. Together, they were a team whose love story was lived publicly and privately, in laughter, creative collaboration, and shared vision. It's hard to mention Rob without thinking of Michele, and it's hard to hear Rob laugh without thinking of Michele smiling, Williams observes. Their synergy was palpable, a living example of what it meant to nurture, guide, and inspire. But now, that legacy is under scrutiny, not just by the public, but by the very systems they spent their lives trying to reform. Nick's charges, coupled with his long-standing mental health struggles, have forced everyone, family, friends, and observers alike, to confront the uncomfortable tension between justice and compassion. Rob and Michele's work with exonerees, their commitment to correcting systemic failures, and their philosophy of second chances now collide with a scenario that challenges the very principles they championed. How does one reconcile love, accountability, and the legal system when tragedy strikes so close to home? Nannen Williams provides a rare lens on this dilemma. Having spent 34 years in prison for a crime he insists he didn't commit, he intimately understands the complexities of justice and the ways in which the law can fail or heal. They were people who gave hope, he says. Hope only exists for the future. And that was what Rob and Michele were about: the future, the seeds they planted, the belief that life could be better for everyone. His words echo not just as tribute, but as a challenge to the audience. In a world rushing to judgment, what does real justice look like, especially when mental health, love, and family are at stake? Even as the public debates the tragedy in headlines and social media soundbites, the Reiners' children are carrying forward their parents' philosophy in ways both quiet and profound. Jake and Romy, grappling with grief, remain committed to understanding, supporting, and advocating for what they see as the underlying truth. Emails to Nannen Williams reveal a resilience, a loyalty, and an adherence to principles instilled by Rob and Michele: family, compassion, and an unwavering belief in justice, not vengeance. These private acts, away from the glare of the spotlight, are perhaps the truest reflection of legacy, love and advocacy persisting even in the face of incomprehensible loss. Yet, even with these examples of hope and commitment, the story is layered with questions. Could more have been done to support Nick? How does the public reconcile the image of a loving family with the reality of violent tragedy? And what unseen threads, private conversations, unspoken struggles, Moments of vulnerability might hold answers that the world is not yet ready to see. The deeper this story unfolds, the more it reveals about the human capacity for empathy, the limits of intervention, and the enduring power of a legacy forged in love. The Reiners' philosophy now stands as both a comfort and a challenge, a reminder that life's most profound truths are rarely simple, that justice is rarely black and white, and that love, even when imperfect, has the power to ripple across time and circumstance. And as the world continues to scrutinize, judge, and speculate, the true essence of Rob and Michele's impact may be measured not in headlines, but in the courage, compassion, and hope they left behind, threads of humanity that refuse to be extinguished, even in the shadow of tragedy. Even in death, Rob and Michele Reiner's influence remains undeniable, a force quietly shaping the narrative that unfolds around them. While headlines focus on Nick's charges, the real story lies deeper, woven into the philosophy, the relationships, and the unseen choices that define their lives. Nan Williams, who experienced the Reiners' devotion firsthand, provides insight into a layer of their world most outsiders never glimpse, a realm of compassion, trust, and relentless advocacy for those society often overlooks. Everything I believe they ever did was about helping and changing things that were broken, Williams reflects. They planted seeds of love, even in places where it seemed impossible. That is their true legacy. The tragedy of December 14th, stark as it is, forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. Nick's mental health, his diagnosis of schizophrenia, and his challenges with reality complicate any narrative of accountability. Rob and Michele had spent decades understanding him, supporting him, and ensuring he received treatment, but even their extraordinary dedication could not prevent the catastrophic outcome. This tension between love and responsibility, support and accountability, creates a moral and emotional paradox that ripples outward, touching every member of the Reiner family and everyone who knew them. Williams recalls the subtle ways Rob and Michele prepared for the unpredictable nature of life, of human frailty, and of the choices people make under pressure. Rob's commitment to justice was never abstract. It was lived, experienced, and tested in the most personal ways. His conversations with Williams often centered on the idea that legacy was more than fame, more than wealth. It was about ensuring that lives, even those seemingly broken, could be changed for the better. And now, in a tragic twist of fate, that philosophy collides with the reality of a son accused of unimaginable violence, leaving the question hanging. What would true justice look like if tempered by empathy? In the wake of the tragedy, Jake and Romy Reiner stand as living embodiments of their parents' principles. Despite the shock, grief, and complexity of the situation, they continue to uphold a philosophy of compassion and understanding, extending support to Nan Williams, reflecting the same values their parents instilled. Their actions reveal a continuity of legacy that cannot be measured by legal outcomes or media narratives. It is felt in the quiet, persistent adherence to principles of care, advocacy, and human dignity. But even in this dedication, uncertainty looms. What is the path forward for Nick? How can a family navigate a justice system that often fails to account for mental illness, nuance, and the long-term consequences of trauma? Williams' words linger. No one knows exactly what that help looks like right now. But if Rob and Michele were here, they would fight to find it. That statement, simple yet profound, frames the broader conflict of this story, the collision of law, love, and legacy, and the challenge of honoring both truth and compassion in a world that demands binary answers. And so, the Reiner story leaves us with lingering questions. What do we owe to those who falter, even when the consequences are tragic? How can love coexist with accountability? How do we honor a legacy built on hope, justice, and empathy in the shadow of violence and loss? These questions may never be fully answered, yet they define the emotional core of the Reiners' tragedy. Their lives, their values, and their influence extend beyond the headlines, offering a profound meditation on the complexities of family, the fragility of life, and the enduring power of compassion even in the face of devastation. As we reflect on Rob and Michele Reiner's lives, the tragedy that surrounds their son Nick, and the unseen threads that connect them to allies like Nan and Williams, one truth becomes undeniable. Legacy is not measured solely in public accolades or fame, it is measured in love, in the quiet courage to fight for what is right, and in the capacity to see humanity even in moments of unimaginable pain. And as this story continues to unfold, we are left to wonder not only what justice will look like, but how the principles Rob and Michele lived by can guide us through the darkest chapters of human experience. Rob and Michele Reiner's story is one of contrasts, a life of public achievement intertwined with deeply private devotion, of Hollywood fame intersecting with the unflinching reality of human fragility. Their legacy was never just about movies, awards, or recognition. It was about people, relationships, and the indelible impact they left on those around them. Nan and Williams, a man who spent more than 3 decades behind bars, yet found a second life through their compassion, stands as living proof of the Reiners' enduring influence. The bond he shared with them was more than friendship. It was a testament to the principle that love, advocacy, and belief in human potential could reshape even the harshest circumstances. Yet, the tragedy of December 14th casts a long, unrelenting shadow over that legacy. Nick Reiner, the son they nurtured and loved, now faces the most serious charges imaginable: first-degree murder of his own parents. The public, accustomed to simplified narratives, struggles to comprehend how a family renowned for empathy and compassion could be torn apart in such a catastrophic way. But the Reiner story is never simple. It is a study in complexity, the intersection of mental health, familial devotion, justice, and the moral dilemmas that arise when love collides with the law. Nan and Williams captures the essence of this tension perfectly. They were the type of people who would never want to see anyone suffer. That includes Nick. That includes me. That was who they were. That is what their legacy means. The true tragedy and the hidden drama lies in the unanswered questions that linger long after the headlines fade. What could have been done differently to support Nick? How should society balance justice and compassion when mental illness complicates accountability? And perhaps most provocatively, what would Rob and Michele want us to take from this story? Their lives were defined by the act of planting seeds of hope, understanding, and love. Even now, in the midst of the most devastating loss, that philosophy challenges us to look beyond judgment and see the enduring lessons embedded in their actions. Jake and Romy, carrying forward their parents' values in the face of unimaginable grief, remind us that legacy is lived, not just remembered. In their emails to Nan and Williams, their quiet courage and continued empathy reveal that even when tragedy strikes with unthinkable force, the principles of love, advocacy, and human dignity can persist. This is the real measure of Rob and Michele Reiner's influence, a legacy defined not by circumstance, but by intention, by the courage to act with integrity, and by the unwavering belief in the potential for change, even in the darkest moments. As the world continues to dissect this story, focusing on charges, mental health, and courtroom proceedings, the Reiners' message endures. Life, love, and justice are never simple, and the most profound truths often reside in the spaces between judgment and understanding. The tragedy of December 14th does not erase a lifetime of compassion, nor does it diminish the countless lives touched by Rob and Michele's extraordinary empathy. Instead, it forces us to confront difficult truths about human fragility, moral responsibility, and the enduring impact of a life dedicated to helping others. And as we grapple with this story, the questions remain. How do we honor a family that gave so much in a world that can take so much away? How do we reconcile grief with the demands of justice? And what would Rob and Michele have wanted for the son they loved so fiercely? In the shadow of tragedy, their legacy continues to teach, challenge, and inspire, an enduring reminder that love, compassion, and the seeds we plant today can ripple far beyond our own time. If you want to stay updated on more exclusive stories and deep dive Hollywood investigations, make sure to subscribe to the channel.